Every leader knows that a thriving organization depends on the energy, productivity, and commitment of its people. But few leaders are able to cultivate the employee engagement and performance needed for this level of success. What's the difference? Positive leadership practices. Welcome to the Positive Leadership Movement Podcast with your host, positive work culture expert, Alex Bratty. Ready to harness the power of positive leadership? Let's dive right in.
Hello and welcome to episode 35 of the Positive Leadership Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bratty, and I'm really excited about this week's show because we have a terrific guest joining us to share her wisdom and tips for leaders. Her name is Lynn Whitbeck, and she is the founder and CEO of Petite to Queen, a company that offers mentoring and coaching to leaders. Let me tell you a little bit about this impressive lady, and then we'll dive into what I think will be a really valuable discussion about some of the challenges leaders face and how to work through them. So Lynn helps the world by providing virtual mentoring leadership programs and tools to achieve more faster. Building on her successes and experiences in executive leadership roles, Lynn shares the lessons learned along her journey to supercharge your career. She coaches women to tap into their inner tigress, transform habits, unleash self-assurance, and emerge a leader. Lynn is the co-author of the highly regarded book, Practical Wisdoms at Work. This quick read guide provides insights to navigate situations, challenges, and opportunities that arise every day in business, teaching you how to broaden your career with skills that will set you apart. And you may have seen Lynn in USA Today, HuffPost, Chicago Tribune, and more. And today she's here to share some of her practical wisdoms with us. And guys, if you heard that introduction and you're about to tune out because it seems more female focused, hold your horses. Lynn has a lot of wisdom that works for male and female leaders alike. So welcome, Lynn.
Hey, I'm excited to be here. And yes, this is not gender specific. You know, all leadership skills are for everyone. So
yes.
It doesn't matter if your hair color is purple and your skin is chartreuse. And whatever gender preference you choose, they all work for everyone.
Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? So it is so great to have you on the show. We were chatting a little bit beforehand and I was sharing, I really love what you do. So just to kind of give our listeners a sort of little insight, like, can you share with me how, because everybody has a slightly different definition, right? How do you define positive leadership? What does it mean to you?
Well, positive leadership is really born out of our own beliefs and our actions. And when I look at a leader and leadership, one of the things that I look for are really 4 core components, the essentials. And those are the ability to create a culture and an environment where your team members thrive. And segueing from that is also that ability to accept and process alternate viewpoints and act upon them. And so that's also helping you foster that great environment, but it also creates that diversity of thought that you can apply in all your leadership decisions and in business. And then as you move through that business and looking at your organization, a really strong leader can look at the organization from multiple levels. So I have this sort of forest theme. So you're in a 747, whatever the latest 767 Dreamliner, whatever.
If anybody's in planes anymore. Imagine the days when you used to be in planes. Yes.
Yes. But you're skimming you're going over the forest. So a leader sees that really big 60,000 foot level, but then they're in that little small plane or even a helicopter and they're skimming those treetops. And then they're at that management level, really working on the tactics and strategy that are going on. And then you can also walk the forest floor. And that's where all of the people are doing the work that feeds into this wonderful machine and creates this beautiful forest. So, so a really strong leader can see these different levels and can walk and talk in those levels.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And of course, I couldn't agree with you more that, the leader has to sort of create the environment for people to thrive, right? That leader is almost responsible for that forest, to continue
Yes.
your analogy, that forest sort of health, if you like, and vitality, right?
Right.
So something I know you talk about quite a bit is, for that leader to do that, it often involves getting out of a comfort zone, right? Doing things that we may not always feel like really good about. Well, we feel good about them, but we find them challenging. Maybe we have fear, maybe it's fear of success, it's fear of failure. And something that can happen around that is that we self-sabotage. And I know you
Yeah.
talk about that a lot. So tell me a little bit about like what leadership skills are there that can help overcome that sort of move towards self-sabotage or not wanting to get out of the comfort zone? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And the power skills is actually my fourth component of a strong leader. And, when you're talking about comfort zone, there are so many reasons that we find that difficult. And it can be, as you said, that fear, it can be the unknown, it can feel like a challenge to our authority. So those are all things that are so important that as a good leader that we can recognize in ourselves. So when we're looking at self-sabotage, they normally can present itself in two really key ways. And one is procrastination, which I know I've certainly
I know
experienced.
nothing about that. I've never procrastinated ever.
In my life.
Not. I'm very familiar. We all are.
and of course our self-limiting beliefs, and our self-limiting beliefs feed the procrastination. So when you're looking at power skills, so just for definition for everyone, power skills, people sometimes refer to these as soft skills. So these are the things that they're always looking for in leaders, because they translate to any position, any industry. But they are so important. That's why they're power skills, and they can be learned just the way any other skill can be learned. And so when you're looking at self-sabotage, your number one power skill, there's three you can access, and that's resilience, agility, and flexibility. But resilience is going to be the first one that you're going to go to. So I'm going to share a story about how I did that. So back in the day, as an executive, I was one of the people who was brought in to close multi-million-dollar deals. And so I had been working on a deal with a global hotel or hospitality organization for several months. And we were at that final, presentation, really thought we were going to close the deal that day. The first part of the meeting was going great, looking at their body language, they're leaning in, they're excited, they're making the eye contact, they're engaged, they're giving really great feedback, and they're involved in the discussion. And then we pivoted to the final deal points that had to be negotiated. And I saw them start to sort of close in on themselves.
I knew there was a butt coming.
Yeah. They're looking down.
A butt coming. It was all too good to be true, right?
Yeah, they're looking down at their paper. They're not making the same eye contact. They still were asking questions, and there was some engagement, but sort of the whole tone of the meeting just sort of went like off a cliff, right? So,
been there.
We closed the meeting, and, go to lunch with I'm talking through, okay, well, hey, we got our minimal actionable commitment. We have a meeting on Monday to go back to. But as the day progressed, I started going down into this dark pit, a dark pit of despair or self-sabotage that, we're not going to get this deal. I've worked on it for months. I mean, the resources that we've put at this, OMG. And so by the evening, I was literally almost reaching this point of despondency. And that's when my resilience, think of Captain America and all those scenes where she gets knocked off of her go-kart, she falls off of the rope, and she picks herself up and says, okay, to go again. And so that's what resilience does for you. So for me, in that situation, I started going, okay, so what's the worst thing that can happen? We lose the deal. But what do we gain from this? We've cracked the code, and we've already got several big hospitality organizations in our pipeline. And we know how we're going to be able to take all this knowledge, leverage it, improve upon it, and create something amazing and beautiful out of it. So
I just love that.
Right. So the worst thing that can happen, it's not really that big a deal, and okay, so we're not going to get this extra perk of income, but we've got so many other things in the pipeline. That's okay. And then I could pivot to, that's a great thing about agility, the ability to pivot. I could pivot to what's likely to happen. We've got a meeting on Monday. Most likely they want to refine, they wanted to process the negotiation and the deal points, and they're going to come back with some refinements. That's most likely what's going to happen. And then that flexibility, really, I was able to use that in that whole process of how I could learn and unlearn and relearn everything we're gaining from this incredible experience. And just to finish out, we did close the deal.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I was hoping it was going to end in that way.
And it was exactly that. It was the most likely situation. They needed time to process and to, regroup, talk about it internally without with us in the room. And then they were able to come back and say, yeah, we're good on this, this, and this, but this we want to change. And what about this? We would like to add this, We hadn't thought about it before, but after our discussion, we realized we had missed this. So it was a great way to close that. And that's what you can do with resilience when you're attacking and battling self-sabotage. It's going to rise up. And it's a skill that you can learn. And it affects every aspect of our life. Look at what we're living through right now. Man alive, do we need resilience?
Amen, sister. Oh, amen. Exactly. And I love that you brought that up, because that is like one of the tools in the positive leaders toolbox, is that resilience. We talk about it a lot on the show. And I love how you talked about sort of the pivot, right? Because again, this is so core to positive leadership, is looking for the good and the strengths, even if the situation doesn't appear to be good in that moment, right? Like you had already figured, okay, what's the worst case scenario? Look, it's not that bad. So we don't get this deal, but look at all the work we put into it. We go pitch other clients, it's like, there's a lot more clients out there. There's an abundance, right? And so we can take what we have. But yeah, I love that. And by the way, I absolutely love the fact that you call soft skills power skills, because whoever named them soft skills, please, Lord, it's been given everybody who works in that space a headache from the get-go, right? Because everybody thinks, they're soft skills. They're not that important. And yet they can be the most important skills that we bring to anything.
Yeah, they are the most important when people are looking at the candidates and they're determining who they're going to hire. It's who's demonstrated those power skills in the process, because those are the people they can flex and pivot in any situation, or as the company changes and evolves, as their roles evolve. So
exactly. So how would you, I mean, I love that story that you told. I mean, there were so many different angles to it. And, when you're dealing with big clients like that, or maybe you are even just dealing with your own team or with peers or people above you, but sometimes we have these situations that feel intimidating, right? And so share with us your practical wisdoms around, how do you deal with that if you're feeling intimidated in a given situation or with certain people?
Right. So when it's with another person, and you had touched on this earlier, is you want to see the good in the other person because they're a human being. Okay. So when you're in that situation, and one thing is to also look at why you're feeling intimidated. If you recognize this behavior pattern in yourself, I would take, the 30 minutes, take a nice calming walk and really think through why you're feeling that way. Because if you can identify where that fear is coming from, because intimidation is fear. Sometimes the person can be a bully. And so that's, responding to that behavior. And I worked for someone who was absolutely at one point in time, I did not report to him because he was the CEO and I had the president in between us. But anytime I had to work with him, I had that feeling that I was on edge. And so with him, I looked for the good in that situation, because he was actually this incredible father. He was an incredible son, taking care of his father. So I could look at like this other side of his personality that I respected and I admired. And so that helped me ground that feelings like he's a person too. And I just need to, stop talking as much and use my powerful pause when he's talking so I can process what he said, not take it personal. Instead, look at it as, what did he just toss to me? And then how do I respond? And so that was really important for me on how I responded to that. So when we look at that, and also in any kind of situation when we're feeling intimidated, you go through that scenario I described earlier. What's the worst thing that can happen? I mean, really look it in the eye, because and I wouldn't say I was intimidated by that situation, but I certainly had a personal situation when my husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And there was only one end game. Okay. He was going to die and pass, which he has. And so I wasn't intimidated, but that was certainly a situation that was terrifying, and tragic. But I also had to recognize, well, this is what's going to happen, but there are so many other ways that we can make the most. This is a gift to make the most of this time. And that's how we chose to respond in that situation. So when you go through those scenarios, it can help you once again pivot and you don't have to accept like the worst thing. I mean, yeah, he was going to die, but we could make this incredible journey. We took this trip of a lifetime that he had always wanted to do. We did all kinds of things while he was healthier. And even when he was really ill, we watched every Jane Austen movie that we had, which sounds crazy, but we had all these BBC versions, and then there's been versions that are made. I've always been a huge Jane Austen fan. He loved that too. And we went through a whole bunch of different like movie series that we could watch together and we could talk about them. And it was still like a special time.
I love that.
So when you're in those situations, once again, really spend that time to identify what's going on. And if it's a work situation, I work and talk a lot if you go to our website about the value vault and building your value vault, because then you can go and grab it whenever you need something from it to help you in that situation, and use that powerful pause, take it in, and then reset. And then you can, really.
And I love that you shared that idea of, hey, they're humans too.
Yes.
Because I think we can get caught up in that, even as leaders, even when you've achieved a certain level, very often there's still going to be someone above that, or there's going to be a client that somehow triggers, that I'm not good enough thing inside you, right? Because we all have
I'm not worthy. Yeah,
I'm not worthy. And so even at that, sometimes I think also leaders tend to think, well, I am a leader now, so, I shouldn't be intimidated by anyone. I shouldn't have these feelings like I'm not good enough, but they still happen. And your pointer there, you shared a lot of wonderful pieces there, but one that just really resonates with me personally is that notion of, hey, they're human beings too.
Yes.
We all are. We all have to, live our lives as humans. And so, when we, in our minds, put people up on this huge pedestal, then we're just kind of making it worse for ourselves, right? It's just remembering, like, we're all humans. We all go to use the bathroom,
We all have to eat.
Exactly.
And for almost all of us, that imposter syndrome will present itself in some way or another. And, you could be working with a peer, another leader, through a business organization or something else. There's so many different ways. And sometimes even we can feel intimidated by our own people who are coming up that, they either like, wow, they're just so brilliant, or they're constantly challenging me. So that's another way to address that.
I love that. So speaking of being challenged, what happens if you're a leader and you're dealing with, it could be people, above, peers, or below, who have different opinions from what you have? Like, how do you advise your clients on that? Like, how should leaders approach that situation where they're dealing with all these different opinions and they're different from how you as a leader personally feel?
Yeah. So the first thing that is the number one thing that you absolutely have to internalize and ground in yourself, that an alternate viewpoint or a different perspective does not mean that it's illegitimate. It's don't never put it in the context of the truth versus illegitimate, or because that is one of the things that even when we look at what's going on around us, you can see that happening all the time. And an alternate perspective, there is value in that. And that's one of the most critical things for a leader, is to be able to bring in this diversity of thought and to be able to process it and to pivot. Because often in business, and I know I found this many times, there's not a right or a wrong decision. It's based on the facts and the figures that we have right now. This is the way we're going to go. And so you make the best decision on the information that you have, but you also have the ability to change your mind. We have the power of choice. So as time goes on and we get more input and more perspective, or we can see how something is playing out, we have the power to choose to move our pivot, change direction. So when we're really accepting that alternate thought, you really want to look at it as that where are they coming from? They're coming from a place where they want to be a part of the solution. They want to give you the best knowledge that they have. They want to protect maybe you or the organization or your family. And so you want to look at them as that they're coming from a place of really, their intentions are so genuine. And when you accept that, that also helps you see, as you said, the good in the other person. You're seeing the good in their intentions.
Yeah.
And, and absolutely, there are some people who are going to have hidden agendas and yada, yada. But in general, you want to bring that in. And even if they do have a hidden agenda, understanding their perspective will also give you an illumination into the issue of how someone else is perceiving this, and can help you to move it forward, because then you can address those concerns however they are presented. So that's what's really important when you're in those situations, because it's not truth versus illegitimacy. Okay. It's really both sides have, or multiple sides are a prism, and we're looking at it from all these different angles. So what we want to do is accept that they could have a unique perspective, and it could come from, like, let's talk about a situation that I encountered quite a bit when you're working with IT versus customer service and versus management. And we're trying to come through with a solution, an automated solution. And with IT, they're looking at things from how it's going to work, really when you're talking about code.
Right.
And customer service is saying, well, I just want to push this button, and, and,
exactly.
And then management's going like, okay, well, we got to bring this together so we have the best customer service, experience, because who can live without their customers for a month, right?
Right.
So we need to have this experience. So when you bring in these perspectives, and then you can understand, like from IT, well, we're looking at a decision tree. The more decisions we put in this decision tree, the more likely is that it's going to break. And that somewhere along the way, you need it to be as clean and as possible as it flows through, all the computer algorithms, right? So that's what's, so you take that information in, and then you can look at, okay, well, this is what they're trying to achieve. How can we get there? And then you can bring those two sides together, because they're both right. And there's common ground.
Exactly. And I think, and that's, there's a lot even just in what you just said there, but just remembering that, being in a groupthink situation is not the best place to be, right? I mean, there's so much research now that the teams and the organizations that have diversity, right? And I mean diversity sort of in all ways. I mean it in terms of who we are as people, the color of our skin, our creed, our religion, whatever. I mean it in that sense, but I also mean it in diversity of opinion too. Those companies, those departments are always more innovative, more creative. They're able to, like you said, have this prism where they're coming at it from different angles and really brainstorming in a much more progressive way than someone has an idea and everybody kind of rallies around it and that's the way we go. Now, that doesn't mean it would be wrong, but maybe it wasn't the best choice, right? And maybe there needed to be more diversity in there. So I love that. You know, it's being mindful that, like, hey, this person has a perspective, and not taking it personally, right? It's not personal to me that you feel differently about this situation. So let me just hear what you have to say, right? And sort of just open the mind a little bit more, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because that they can really give you some powerful insights, like that situation I was talking about with IT, that if you just ran with something without having consulted them or really listened to their concerns, you could have a program that was constantly crashing.
Yeah.
You know, and what kind of customer experience is that? So instead, by bringing that in and hearing their concerns, they're really mitigating your risk, you know,
exactly.
And you're actually able to build a better solution by everyone having
and probably faster too. Right?
Yeah, without having to do the rework.
Exactly.
Nothing so wasteful as rework.
Exactly. Okay, so we were talking about this too, like, and this is a really interesting piece that you raised. What about dealing with crazy or weird questions that seem to come from nowhere, right? And I think as leaders, we've all been there, right? You're leading some meeting and, you know, you think everybody's with you, or like maybe moving on to like the next topic, and all of a sudden someone raises their hand and asks this question that just kind of seems to be from the moon, and you're there trying to be respectful of what's happening, right? Because you're in front of all these people and you do want to be inclusive of everything, but it just seems really off base. So what strategy does a leader use to respond in that situation, Lynn?
Yeah, so I use this pickle strategy. So you're in a pickle, you have to get out of the pickle.
I love that.
And so the first thing I use is my powerful pause. And so that's where you're going to stop. You're going to really hear what they said and process it. So that's the first thing. Okay. The second thing is, it doesn't matter why they asked the question. So just don't even go there. Don't go down that rabbit hole. It doesn't matter why they asked that question. They've asked the question. Okay. So, and then, you know, the next thing is really to control your emotions. So even like while we're talking right now, those emotions can come through in the sense that your tone of voice, your body language, you know, the frustration or even anger, or dismissal. Don't go into any of the negative Nelly or negative Ned path, you know? So that's why it's really important to get a handle on that, to consciously think, okay, my body language, I'm open, I'm standing up straight, I'm looking them in the eye, you know, and as you're processing this. And then the next thing is, you really want to, you know, we've been talking about mindfulness. You do want to keep in mind, you know, that they're another team member, they're a peer, a client, whatever the relationship is. And you want to give them that value as another human being, and to see the good in that person, that they are they've posed this question for a reason. Okay. And so, you know, as you go through that pickle, the next thing is to let go. So I talked about controlling your emotions. You also need to let go of any kind of frustration or anger about you, because sometimes a question can almost throw like a monkey wrench into a whole way a conversation is going. And all of a sudden it's like, pow, you know?
Right.
So you want to let that go so that you can repivot the conversation. But finally, you know, when you're back to the E, you want to respond in a way that is embracing them as another person, and giving them their dignity, and being graceful, so that you can really acknowledge the question in a really powerful way, and give it to them politely, with genuine, you know, interest. And, you know, one thing you can do is, if you know, are curious, you know, as you answer the question, you could say, tell me more, you know, help me understand, you know, so where are we coming at with this question? Because sometimes it's just literally to see if they can knock you off your rocker.
Right. So so it sounds like you're saying would answer.
They're in totally different mind states.
Oh, I'm sorry. The audio got caught up there. We talked over each other. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the video.
Paused. No, what I was saying was, so it sounds like you would answer the question right there. Or are there times where if it's so out of left field, you would simply acknowledge it and say, hey, let's just put a pin in that and come back to it later, or let's talk offline? Or would you always like absolutely completely address it right there and then in the meeting?
No, you can't always answer. You may not have an answer. So when you don't have an answer, you be honest. I don't have an answer.
Right.
Can you tell me more? Like, get some information, or, can we address this after the meeting, to your point, put a pin in it. Let's get together and discuss this. I want you to help me understand so that we can address this. So, always make sure that you're embracing and expressing, that that you're bringing them in. And so even if someone's doing it in a malicious way, when you do that, you've risen above, you've taken the high road, and
you're taking the air out of the sails. Yes.
And so in that case, you're not letting them intimidate you, because let's look at this and let's address this. And if it's something that's that important, you might need to, let's look at this right here and now. This is a really important point. Back to my IT thing, we hadn't thought about how this would play out, that it's going to be really complex and it's going to cause the system to crash. So how can we make this more streamlined? Let's get out on the whiteboard and let's figure it out right now.
Yeah, I love it. Well, and on the topic of meetings, so you have your corporate background. I know you've probably been in a lot of meetings where you were the only woman. I know I have, certainly in my corporate background. I was in a very male dominated industry. And to some extent with some of my work, I still am. And so, and I'm sure some of our listeners have run into this too. So when you've been the only woman in a meeting, how did you prepare, lead, communicate your points? Like, how did you approach that and handle it?
Yeah. So, one thing, I was never really conscious that I was the only woman in the meeting, but I was often. And the number one thing is preparation. I follow that 80-20 rule, regardless of what you're doing, whether you're trying to implement a big program, if you're trying to close a sale, if you're, hold on, I'm going to get some of my coffee here.
Yep, go for it.
So when you've prepared, one of the things that it does is it gives you the assurance and confidence, because you know all your facts and figures. You've got this, know your numbers, right? And you're ready. So also when you do all that preparation work, you can anticipate. Part of it is anticipating questions, challenges, queries, things that, could, like you say, take you off track. So in a meeting, you want to stay above the weeds. You don't want to get in the weeds. So when we're talking about the forest floor, depending on the type of the meeting, you're really rarely walking the ground in a meeting, unless you're actually going through a rapid improvement process or something like that. So, it's important that you've outlined those bullet points. And also when you're walking through it, where are points all the way through that you can check the temperature of the audience, make sure that they're engaged, looking at their body language, stopping. And with the way you completely frame your entire presentation is that you're answering the why. Why the heck are we here?
Right.
Why are we having yet another meeting?
Right.
So those are so important, because then when you've done all that work, preparation, when you get into the meeting, then you can go through those in really bullet point, rapid point fashion, ask questions, check temperature, get that response. So you're not bulldozing. You want to make sure that it's really a dialogue and it's a conversation, because otherwise they're not retaining the information. They need, everyone in that meeting, they need to be taking notes. They need to be, you can tell by their body language if they're in or out of, focus. And then also that conversation. And so that's a way to make sure that everyone is retaining the information, because you're going to be much more successful when you've done that. And so, gender aside, I think really it just comes down to being prepared, and then really and then all the four C's of any meeting. So, be prepared. You're going to be inspired, share your enthusiasm and passion, because that's going to get them far more engaged. People are attracted to positive leadership. I mean, It just brings them in. And so be brief is the next one. So be brief is, not wasting their time. Go through the bullet points. If people have some things they want to get at more in depth, you can side table it, do that. So, and then finally, be gone. Finish the meeting and move on. Create a minimal actionable commitment that you're going to have for the next steps or anything that you need to go into depth on, like certain pockets of information that don't need everyone, but need certain people to work out.
I love it. I love it. I love your 4 B's. They're terrific. And I love that you mentioned, and here's another power skill, a soft skill, reading the room, right? Are people engaged? Are they leaning in or are they leaning back? And, I know I've been in meetings where, whether I'm leading it or I'm a part of it, but it's my turn to kind of share and, be the point person. Sometimes people are not engaged. And I've actually had to say, okay, what's going on? What's happening? I see you're tuning out. What's going on? And actually just call out the elephant in the room. Don't just roll with it and feel like, well, that didn't go very well. I don't know why everybody tuned out, because now there's this other dynamic going on that they didn't want to say anything. You didn't want to say anything. And probably something got held back that also then impacts whatever we're working on, whatever the project is, whatever the initiative is. Right. So I love that. Like, read the room, look for people. Are they actually engaged in what's going on? And do you need to address that if they're not, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
Without putting someone like on the spot. To your point, It really needs to be a collective. So that way, once again, because that's embracing and bringing people in. And, and you can also do it like with a joke or anything, it's like, okay, we're going to talk about this, but I want everybody to take a minute and I want you to shake it out so that we're ready to get back into the discussion, because this is really important. And this is why, that 60-second pitch as to why they need to be engaged, and then get them to do something like, okay, everybody take a minute and look at your text messages or whatever, so we can get to it. And, and also sometimes that sort of physical energy, like, I want you all to stand up and shake it out and let's get back down and let's, get into this. And this is why. And so that's also really valuable, because it literally energizes people and refocuses their attention.
Especially if you have the misfortune of being on after they just had lunch. And was it good? I feel kind of sleepy now. Okay. Yes, that's when you definitely need to do the whole, let's stand up, let's shake it out. Let's just, get the oxygen flowing again, I
Nothing
love
like speaking to a crowd of 300 people or 3,000 or whatever when after the big luncheon, right?
Yes, exactly. Well, Lynn, thank you so much for joining the Positive Leadership Movement today. I know our listeners have gotten so much value from the wisdom you've shared with us on this show. What if they want to get in touch with you? Can you tell us, how they can connect with you further? And also, I think you have a special complimentary offer to share as well. So, just tell us a little bit more about what you do, how people can connect, and your offer.
Yeah, so you can find us at petite2, the digit 2, queen.com. All of our social is there. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. And of course, we definitely, positive leadership is so important. And I appreciate being on this show so much, Alex. It's been wonderful. And if you want to learn more, I do offer a free chat, and you can go to petite2queen.com/chat. And you can book a complimentary chat just to talk through whatever is going on, whatever challenge you're having with leadership, or you're up-leveling your sales, wherever you're at. And then we can work on that together and see where that goes.
I love it. And you've got coaching and mentoring and other programs, right? You have multiple different things that you do.
We do. So we actually provide one-on-one coaching along with company coaching. And we find that we have a number of organizations that we work with on our sales program. So we have a really great sales performance program, and then an implementation of sales strategy. I've got a 13-step process to go through for implementing sales programs to close more sales, to be more effective. And so we have that. We also have organizations that participate in our leadership, and we also provide additional content through webinars and workbooks and checklists, worksheets, etc., through a couple of different membership program sites.
I love it. I love it. So check her out. She's amazing. Lynn Whitbeck of Petite2 as in the digit queen.com. So check her out. All right. So thank you, everyone, so much for joining us for this episode. If you have positive leadership stories to share, or you have questions on this topic and what we talked about here today, shoot me a line at questions@positiveleadershipmovement.com. I always love to hear from you. That's it from us for this week. Thank you for being part of the Positive Leadership Movement and inspiring me to do what I do every single day.
Make sure you subscribe to the show. If you like this episode, please rate and review. If you want to get more from Alex, check out Happiness at Work, where she provides leaders with a proven path to cultivate a positive work culture that increases performance, productivity, and profitability. Go to happinessatworknow.com. Join us next week and harness the power of positive leadership for your organization.